Are you ready for Friday's NHL trade deadline? We certainly are. This is Hockey Inside Out, and I'm not Jessica Rusnak. Welcome to the HIO Show. I'm Stu Cowan of the Gazette, filling in as host this week for Jessica Rusnak, who's a little under the weather. Get well soon, Jess. Look forward to having you back in your regular chair next week. Happy to be joined this week by not one, but two former Canadiens players on the panel, both with Stanley Cup rings from 1986, Chris Nyland and Rick Green, of course, along with our regular hockey analytics guru, Andrew Berkshire. The NHL trade deadline is 3 p.m. on Friday, almost upon us. The uncertainty must be really stressful for the players at this time. Along with the GMs and journalists, we're waiting to hear if Kent Hughes is going to do anything. What do you think about all, Chris? This time, it must bring back some memories of your playing days.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure it's a stressful time for guys. Listen, when I was traded from Montreal, I never knew it was coming. It wasn't during the deadline, so for me, it was a shock and certainly tough to pick up and move during the season, deal with family stuff, and just coming to a new environment. But yeah, I think in this day and age, we always hear it's a business. But then when the business plays out, it can be difficult on players, leading up to it, and your name is out there, all these names you see: Gensel, Hannafin, Adam Henrique, Chychrun, Sean Walker, Frank Vachano, all these guys that are on the board possibly being moved. It's got to be a little unsettling. Some guys probably can't wait to get out of the situation they're in, and some may not want to go, and that's the thing. So, I'm sure it's not a lot of fun seeing your name in the paper now and again, on social media saying, you could be moved soon, and trying to focus on what you have to do on the ice.
Well, let's go back, Chris. When you were traded, it was along with a first-round pick to the Rangers. They used that pick 20th overall to take Stephen Rice. The Habs also got a first-round pick. They used that to take Lindsey Vallis, 13th overall, who played one game in the NHL. For Rick, I know you were traded 3 times coming to the Canadiens. What are your memories of those times and the impact it had on you and your family?
Well, I look back at, I call it a promotion, getting out of Washington, which happened, after the season. Up until that point, I didn't really think as bad as the Washington Capitals were that I was going to get moved, out of there. Just because they were, working on trying to get all their first round picks, together for a period of time to show some improvement. But it's really an unsettling time of the year. And Kent Hughes has a really tough job at this time of year, trying to, entertain different ideas on how to make his team better. And, he has a personal side to himself where he really cares about his players, and he wants to do what's best for them and for his team. But as far as being in that environment, there's guys that there's speculation on who's going to get moved, who's not going to get moved. Family comes into play as far as the anxiety is added into that picture, and it's not easy, but it's the nature of the business. And I know as a player, you're kind of looking forward to, maybe we're going to get this player or that player that's going to help us out. It's just part of it. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because, Ken Hughes, he doesn't have to do anything, really. He's in a position where the guys are under contract and he can just he can listen to the offers and pick and choose what he thinks might work best.
Well, looking back in time, Rick, it was September 9th, 1982, when you were traded from Washington, along with Ryan Walter, to the Canadiens for Brian Engblom, Doug Jarvis, Rod Langway, and Craig Laughlin. Huge trade, but 4 years later, of course, the Canadiens won the Stanley Cup. Andrew, do you think Kent Hughes is going to be busy on Friday?
Yeah, I think he's going to be fielding phone calls. I think there's a lot of fans that want to see big moves, but at the same time, you look at the way the Canadians are playing right now, you look at the structure of the contracts that they have to move and who is available. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's no large move. A guy like David Savard, I'm starting to come around to the idea of keeping him just because of how well respected he is in that locker room. And you see, I read, I forget who wrote it, but they were talking about why he wanted to come home to Montreal and playing in Columbus and other areas where he noticed like his kids were only speaking English at home. And on a personal side, that's like, you can't help but feel a little bit for that, right? He wants to be here. And he's a guy who was signed for maybe at the time what looked like a little bit too much money, but has come in and play a top 4 or even top pairing role, which he's not necessarily suited for the entire time that he's been with the Canadians. Never complained, always had a really happy demeanor. I've been great with the young kids as they went a completely different direction as a team than he expected likely when he signed on. So he's been such a good trooper for the Canadians that it makes sense to me to keep him around. But I think what I'm more interested in around this time is what Chris and Rick are able to give us for their insights. Like Rick, for example, being traded from a very poor team to a very good team, or a much better team, we'll say, than the Washington Capitals. We talk a lot in like the analytics community about like how players can stand out on bad teams versus you can get kind of lost in the shuffle on the good teams. But in your experience, does playing on a good team, is it easier than playing on a bad team, or is it easier to stand out on a bad team than a good team?
Well, for me, to be given the opportunity to jump into the Canadians mix with the type of talent that they had compared to what I was used to, was nothing but, great news. Ryan Walter and I talked about it many times before, saying that when this all went down, to come to Montreal, it wasn't a question of getting in the playoffs. It was a question of when is the Stanley Cup coming. So we had quite a bit of pressure on us to try and get things going sooner than later. It took a little while, and we finally got what we ultimately wanted to do. But it was a trade that we really enjoyed the chance to come to an organization like the Montreal Canadiens after being with an expansion team like Capitals, which were quite painful.
I wrote a column this week. I mean, I'd be surprised if Hughes trades David Savard unless it's a first-round pick, at least coming back. You wonder, Toronto GM has already said he'd be willing to give up a first-round pick. You wonder if, I think David Savard would be a great fit in Toronto. I don't know if they can squeeze him in under the cap. Jake Allen, of course, the other guy, with the 3-goalie system, I think it's got to the point where Hughes should just take whatever he can get for Jake Allen now and move on with the 2-goalie system. But one of the things, Knuckles, is that impresses me with Hughes is just the way he handles people and players. And I know Serge Savard broke your heart when he traded you from Montreal, but you and him are still great friends, right? Maybe just talk a little bit about Serge and how he was maybe similar to Kent Hughes in that way.
Yeah, Serge is cool like that. I think Kent, the good thing about Kent is he worked the other side of it, right? And he understands what players go through. And I think he takes that into account when he's doing his job here as general manager. I think he's done a damn good job. There's no question about it. Every GM, you're going to, critique what they do. And, this trade was no good. But I think overall he's done a pretty good job here trying to get this salary cap under control and changing things. He was left with some bad contracts, and he's really they have this thing turned around, going in the right direction. As far as Serge, we're still friends today. And, I think if he had to do that over again, he might have not done what he did. I put him in a bad situation. Having it out with Puddinhead like I did. And, it was difficult. I was heartbroken. I never wanted to play for another team. I never felt right. And not that I didn't feel right. I still did my job, but I was just not the same when I left Montreal. Like I said, I fought. Like Andrew, the question you asked about playing a good team, bad team, always played on good teams in Montreal. Boston, I was on pretty good teams too. We were winning hockey games. New York, when I got there, they were out of a playoff spot, way out. We roared back the end of the season. I like to think I had a part in that. Just they had no pushback on that team really. And when I come in and started fighting and protecting teammates and doing my thing, I think it helped that team. We lost. I think we were 20 points out, 15 points out, and we lost on the last day of the season. We would have gotten the playoffs. Jersey played in Chicago, and John McClain scored with 2 minutes left to tie it. Then he scored in overtime to win. If they tied or lost, we'd have gotten the playoffs. So we made quite a run, but that was not a good team that I played on in New York. It was older. They had Marcel Dion, Guy Lafleur. He came the next year, but Phil was kind of crazy behind the wheel as a GM. He was so emotional, but yeah.
So if David Savard really wants to get traded, maybe you should hit Marty St. Louis in the head with a puck at practice, right, Knuckles?
That'll do it. It wasn't that. That was long before I got traded. When he was assistant coach. But yeah.
But you mentioned about GMs and how they handle their guys, and Serge Savard. My experience with him was nothing but a positive one in the way that. Basically, I was up for a new contract, so he said, "Come in the office." He goes, "Okay, listen, this is where you stand in the league. This is where you stand on our team. This is how much I'm paying you," and that was it for the extent of the contract. Agreed, done, and out the door you go. And even going back, the trade that sent me to Detroit after we had lost to Calgary in '89. I took kind of a year away, and I still had a year under contract with the Canadians. And I saw the team was changing a little bit and blah, 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 and I kind of lost it as far as my motivation goes. So Sir says, if you want to come back and you want to go somewhere, just let me know. And I ended up asking, can you trade me to Detroit, because Detroit was paying the most. And he sent me to Detroit for whatever, third or fifth round pick. And again, very accommodating and, very similar in his ways, like Ken Hughes, where he has a certain touch and feel for his guys. And that's a lot of respect coming from that position.
Andrew, yeah, and mind you, Rick, you might have had another Stanley Cup if Serge didn't trade me there in '89.
Yeah. You just needed that little bit of grit there to stand up against the physical flames.
They didn't have the grit. Sorry.
Andrew, it's interesting you said before about David Savard, though, and I saw that quote from him about he was concerned his kids who were born in Columbus were losing their French. They'd be playing outside by themselves speaking English. He left $750,000 a year on the table from another offer he had to come here. So that just shows you how much coming back to Montreal meant for him. And look how well he's been playing recently. I mean, Andrew, the Canadians playing recently on this road trip has been quite impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. And Savard in particular, I think he had a spectacular game against the Nashville Predators. Him and Xhekaj have been working off each other very, very well. And I think having that physical element with him allows Savard to be a little bit less physical and just kind of play within his limits a little bit more, not having to reach out and hit guys behind the net. He can kind of play the way that Shea Weber did around the end of his time there in Montreal, where it's like he's stationary in a very small zone around the net. You come in that zone, you're going to get hurt, but he's not going to run around chasing because he knows where the important part is. And that's kind of allowed Savard to really play his best game. And also offensively this year, I know the goal that he scored against Nashville was pure luck, but offensively, he's been great. He's been producing offense. He's been scoring goals like crazy. I think he has 5 even strength goals so far this season in 40 games. It's pretty darn impressive for a 33-year-old defenseman. I know he scored a lot in junior and early in his NHL career, but when he shows flashes of offense, I think you can see that there's still a very good player in there, and 33 is frankly not that old. He's still got something left.
Yeah, I still think it'd be a great fit with Toronto. Rick, does he remind you of any defenseman that you played with or coached?
Kind of like Craig Rivet, maybe. Recent memories, similar style. Kind of always in the way, try to keep things simple and try not to get in too much trouble. But yeah,
sounds like you.
A kind of player that everybody wants to have, right, Max?
Yeah.
Knuckles, what's impressed you most?
Especially off the ice.
Knuckles, what's impressed you on this?
What's impressed me on this team?
On this road trip where they got
they got some spunk. That's still one of the weak areas. Last night, Nashville, 2 of the goals were like such big mistakes in their own end. The second and third goal, like Goalie leaves the front of the net on the third goal, I think it was. I'm not sure. Like, that's one of the things, and Rick will tell you that as defenseman in our system, you always had a D-man in front of the net. He does not have to go there. And it leaves the net front wide open. And then on I think the second goal, Suzuki's on the weak side of his man. He's in there looking to play a situation on the wall. He's playing off the 2 guys that are in there, one of his guys and one of their guys, but the Nashville players behind him. It's like, this is basic stuff that you don't, at this point in this rebuild, these guys can't be continuing to make these mistakes or they're going to lose these hockey games. They're winning how many overtime games this year? I mean, hello. At some point that has to change or they're going to be close all the time and never quite getting there. And, those things have to change. But listen, there is no quitting them. I think Josh Anderson, for a guy who hasn't played, he fought that kid last night. He was in on some plays, on that Joshua Waugh goal. The back check he made, turning the puck over in the neutral zone and going to Waugh was awesome. There was no quitting him. For a guy who hasn't, maybe been as consistent as people would like him, I thought he had a good game. But, boy, they got to really button up on the D. But it's been a good road trip for them so far. Happy for them.
It was a weird game, too, because usually when they have those defensive breakdowns, it's not traced back to Suzuki or Goalie. And those are the 2 guys who got beat pretty consistently against the Predators were Suzuki and Goalie. And ironically, a very off game for Nick Suzuki, who we have very high expectations of now. And then he comes out in overtime, and he's the guy who's kind of worn the goat horns. 3 goals against on that night, all traced back to misplays by him, and he ends up winning it, which I guess is a good thing in a way, that it shows that even when you're having an off game, you can contribute. But it's one of those things that I think you're really nailing the head on, Chris, is you have to make sure that you don't allow those games to build up in the back of your mind. It's like, oh, we can play like that and still win. Yeah. Like, the Oilers have done for so long, still to this day, right? It's like, oh, well, we can give up the first 3 goals and Connor's going to save us. That kind of attitude, when it creeps in, is why you get teams like Buffalo that stay out of the playoffs for forever, or Columbus that's stuck in a constant rebuild, Arizona. So it's a good sign, but also you gotta look at the good stuff and the process before the result, right?
And I think it's fair. Sorry, I was just going to say it's fair to say, Knox, that some things will never change. Don't trust the forward to play defense. It's just, it's going to be a goal or a real good chance against. So that's a conversation I would love to have. Martin St. Louis mentioned too his forwards, because that's been around for 100 years.
Well, so guys like you got to get up over your own blue line once in a while.
When you're not sure, just go stand in front of the net. Just stand there. Something's going to happen eventually. And it saves energy, actually.
So, Rick, as a former defenseman and a former defense coach with the Canadiens, when you see these breakdowns, how much of it do you think is on the coaching, or maybe players being confused with the system or where they're supposed to be, or is it just mistakes?
Well, I would say it's a combination of both. I don't know what's been directed as far as, responsibility of the defense go as far as what I see. It's just basically grab your guy and follow him all over the place, which I'm, all the teams, if you look at the way that all the teams are playing, Nux, it was a no-no to have two defense in our day in the corner. It just was not going to happen. But if you look at the play of, the league, a lot of times they have the defenseman back behind the net in the corners and, counting on the responsible forwards to take care of the front of the net. So it's a line between, I think, that they're having problems with is confusion as far as when to be aggressive, when to be passive, and when to and how to react to who is the most dangerous guy on the ice. And you basically hold your ground to protect that area. And, large percentage of the time, it's either in the slot or the front of the net. So there's a little bit of, work to be done, I think, as far as them understanding. Yeah, you want to go. Martin St. Louis wants them all to be part of the offense. But there's a time and there's situations that happen during the game that you have to put the brakes on a little bit and say, maybe
you can't play offense when you don't have the puck.
Yeah, so it's just put the thing on hold as far as you'll have an opportunity when the situation is right to jump in there. But if it's not right, let's just make sure that you take care of that responsibilities in the defensive zone and be in the right position instead of on the offensive side. Be on the defensive side. Getting the numbers out there for the certain players.
So the Canadiens will head into the final stretch of the season after Friday's 3 p.m. trade deadline. Andrew, what do you hope to see from this team after the trade deadline? I know it might be a little difficult, so we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but just overall.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most interested in looking forward for this team is see how consistently they can continue this performance. Now, it's been almost a month where they've been playing really good hockey at 5-on-5, better than they have in the last several years. So I'd like to see how consistently they can continue that, especially the top two lines there with Joshua Wallace solidifying the second line. But the other thing that I'd really like to see is just figure out something for the three goalie situation. It doesn't have to be a big return, but I think you look at Jake Allen this year, and I can't imagine it's a nice situation to be in for him. He's a veteran guy. He deserves a chance to play or be on the bench at least for some playoff games as a security blanket for another team. He's been good this year. Not amazing, but he's been solid. There's options around. So at some point, it makes sense that he should be moved, but it might not happen because there's so many goalies that seem to be sticking up the gum in the works kind of thing. It seems like Markstrom is still, even though Calgary said they're not moving him, teams are still pursuing. So until those balls fall, probably won't be time for Jake Allen.
Knuckles, what do you want to see from these guys?
They have so many good prospects on D. I don't know. Do you move a D man? And again, I don't think Hughes is going to do anything unless he gets what he wants. I think he's going to, because he's really under no pressure there to do anything. Now, as far as the goaltending situation, I'd like to see that alleviated. I don't think it's a good situation for the two young guys. Montalban, I think, has really stepped up this year. And yeah, Primo may be still a question mark somewhat, but Jake Allen, yeah, I like to see them be able to move him and get not looking for too much. Just get rid of if you can get rid of the salary and the third goaltender. I've never believed he was a starting goaltender even when he was in St. Louis. I always thought he was 1A or the really good backup. And I'd like to see them maybe move him.
I would love to see the progression continue with, Slafkovsky. This kid has really figured out how to play and, really, really nice to watch. And there's probably nobody happier than himself knowing that he's capable of playing, he's capable of making things happen. I mean, Arbor Jacki, another guy that came in kind of in a tough situation to get started when he returned from Laval. And he's stuck with it and has found a way to consistently play in a smart way. And again, the future is about these guys, and they need to play, and they need, lots of ice time. Joshua Roy, another kid that's, got great potential that I'd love to see him to continue to get opportunities to play in every situation and see, what he's all about. So they've got a tremendous amount of upside with what they have as far as depth in different positions. Let's let these youth and young players do and be given the opportunity and see where they're at and how they stack up. And I think that's what the future is, and I believe that's what their mindset is also.
Yeah, this three goalie situation hasn't been good for anyone, and Marty St. Louis probably hates it more than anyone because Ken Hughes has basically told him you got to play all three goalies. I think one of the reasons Jake Allen has struggled is he just hasn't had enough practice time and game time. And I understand what Kent Hughes was doing with the three goalie system. He didn't want to lose Caden Primo on waivers, and he was hoping he would get something of value for Jake Allen. But it really has reached the point. I agree with you guys. Like, I think on Friday you just take whatever you can get. I don't think his value is going to be higher in the offseason unless Kent Hughes was to package him with something else. But just I think for everybody's sake, all three goalies, it's best that they just move on from this. One of the things I want to see after the trade deadline, Knuckles, and I imagine you're going to agree with this, I want to see Michael Pezzetta play more. I'm surprised he's been a healthy scratch for so many games. Jolinen's playing on that line. He's gone 40 games without a goal. Pezzetta, you know what you're going to get, right? Knuckles, I scratch my head a bit when I see him being a healthy scratch for so many games.
Yeah, I scratched my head when Jack got sent down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is there something there with tough guys? I don't know. But Joshua Watt and Jolinen, whatever. Who was the other kid you said? Was it?
Well, Jolinen's got 40. He's got 40 games without a goal.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is. And I think he's been pretty good in the shootout, hasn't he? Here and there.
He missed the last two.
But he had been pretty good, right?
Yeah,
and look at all them games they're in. So
yeah.
Does that have something to do with it? I don't know how they're thinking. Listen, when you. And again, with the analytics and stuff, sometimes they weigh on some decisions they make. I like, guys that have character and are willing to, put those intangibles out there and help the team. And I'm not saying analytics don't work. They can't help. They can't be an aid. But, I don't know. I like to see that kid in the lineup for sure. But maybe they feel they don't need him because Jack is back there now, and if the rough stuff gets going, he's going to be able to handle it.
Well, Andrew, you're an analytics guy. Do you think that factors into why Pezzetta's not playing?
I don't think so. I think they're trying to see if they can get some scoring out of the fourth line in like creating four lines that play in a similar way. But if you look at when the fourth line has been effective this year, it's been when it's been a simple line, right? And I think that's what you get from Michael Pezzetta every night. Like we can talk about analytics, and Michael Pezzetta is never going to be the best player on a team, but what he does bring is very predictable routes, very predictable decision making, and I think that makes him easy to play with on a line like that. I think he's been a pretty successful fourth liner this year. He scores once in a while. He's got, for his player type, I think a really surprisingly good one-timer when he gets a chance to get it off. So I'd like to see him in the lineup a little bit more just to bring that physical presence, grind it out, forecheck. Does he have defensive deficiencies? Sure. But so does Ulinen this year. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. I know there's been a lot of fans that want to see Ulinen get a bigger opportunity. And at times this year, I think he has deserved that. But it's been a long stretch where, frankly, he just hasn't played very well.
Yeah, and that's, I think, Rick, like with Pezzetta, you know what you're going to get, right? He's going to finish every check. He's going to, 7 minutes of ice time are not going to be wasted.
I mean, even if he plays 4 minutes, you have him on the bench. He's the kind of guy that understands what his role is. And when he's thrown out there, look out. He's going to bring energy. He's going to sometimes change the momentum of the game. And, a good kid that really understands what he needs to do when given the opportunity. And for whatever reason, he's kind of put on the back burner behind some of the other guys. And I'm not totally in love with that scenario, because I do like what he brings, and he does make the opposition be aware of his presence. And if you look at their group, there's not a lot of guys up front there that play that type of gritty, hard game that is still part of the culture of the NHL. When you see some teams that are having success, they got some big bodies that play gritty, and I don't know if they have enough of those guys. So that type of ingredient is really missed, and he's the kind of guy that brings it.
Yeah, what I like about him too, Rick, is he embraces the fourth line role. Like, I've spoken with him this season. He's talked about how difficult it can be at times, because you can go like 25, 30 minutes without getting on the ice. As he said, get a shift halfway through the second period, then you sit out the rest of the second period. You don't get back on the ice until 6 minutes into the third. You throw in the intermission. It's a long time to sit there. Then you got to get up on the ice and get your legs going. Knuckles, I remember imagine when you first started, you had that fourth line role.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. Like, I was hungry to play. I had to sit for a little bit, and that was part of the MO here back in the day. You didn't fucking play right away. You sat there and watched. And, once they started putting me in with Jarvis and Gainey, and, I was able to work with them. And then when Doug got traded and Cobb came, we had a great line together. And then I was on the ice all the time. For a tough guy, you don't see that often, especially back in that day. Guys sat on the bench when they fought. I was playing all the time. And, I had great line mates that helped me, and certainly helped me understand the system. And we got comfortable together. I mean, 2 Hall of Famers. And we really, when that role is defined, it's so much easier for a player, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, it was. I never had a beef with that. Once I got going and playing with those guys, man, it was awesome to be able to do that. And I found it tough when it's like near the end. I remember Bob Gainey said to me, you can squeak out another couple of years in your contract if you're okay with diminished ice time. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm never going to be okay with that. I just didn't want to sit in the bench. Send me home. See you later.
Well, if you're okay with diminished ice time, doesn't that kind of say like you're not all in at the same time? Like, it's one thing to cause disruptions, but if you're just okay with being demoted and like your head down, okay, I'll do this role, isn't that almost like in a way a bad attitude? Because you have to want more to be in the NHL, right?
It's also okay, Sandra. It's accepting the role you have too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that they mentioned with Pizzetti. He's sure, he'd love to be on the third line. The second line, but he sort of accepted his role. But like as he said, you're always trying to get better. And he said that Marty St. Louis is the first coach he's had in the NHL level who's told him, like, don't just dump the puck and chase it. Like, if you think you have a play, hang on to the puck, make a play. Did a coach do that with you too, Knuckles, when you were in that situation?
Yeah, Lemire did that with me. Yeah. He did all his drills. A lot of his drills, the warm up drills, were all with pucks. And he always said, listen. He asked me once, he said, how long do you think you have the puck in a game? And I said, I don't know, about a minute. He said, a minute? He said, more like 10, 15 seconds tops, 10 maybe. And he said, when you get the puck on your stick, you better be able to do something good with it. And you don't want to panic with the puck. He said, that's why all these warm-up drills I do with you, with the team, and all these 2-on-1 and all I want you to be more comfortable with the puck when you have it, skating with the puck. Get your legs moving right away, do something with it, and do something good with it. So, yeah, Lemire was instrumental in that with me, big time.
And Nux didn't realize in order to get more ice time, the way about it wasn't to shoot a puck and hit the coach in the head. From that point on, his minutes did diminish, but he didn't realize that.
So I didn't shoot it. I flipped it.
Yeah, I saw it. It was a direct hit.
So Rick,
one of your better shots too, actually.
What? I should have been on the power play more.
To see the crest, I'm going, oh no, it's incoming. It's going to get him. And but he was tough. He didn't go down.
And he didn't even remember. You said, "Hey, Knuckles," after.
No, the old. I met him at the old forum there one day. We were filming a thing, and he was sitting in front of me in the stands. I said, "Hey, Johnny, how you doing, John?" And I said, "How's your head?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Remember I flipped the puck and hit you in the head?" He goes, "That never happened." I said, "Come on, you got 8 stitches. What do you mean?" And he was like, "That never happened." Greeny, you know what happened, right?
Yeah, he lost. From that point on, he lost his memory.
He did. I come in the room. He had that one of them, them blue ice bags with the cap on it on his head. As Jacques said, "You get in there and apologize to him." I said, "All right, I will. No problem." I went in. I said, "Hey, Jean, I didn't mean to do it. I just flipped it. It took off.
Well, Rick, your favorite line is "Never trust the forward." Did you trust Knuckles?
Actually, we got spoiled because if you look back at our play, whether it's his line or Screwy or anyone, our job was really one of we knew what we had to do, and everybody was in sync, and it was different because everybody bought into defense, and ultimately it won us a lot more than people give it credit for.
Yeah. Moving on here, David Reinbacher, Canadiens' first-round pick, 5th overall last year. Hasn't had a great season with Cloton in the Swiss League. 1 goal, 10 assists in 35 games. It looks like he will probably end this season playing in Laval. Andrew, do you think he can make the jump to the NHL next year, or is it going to take a little longer?
It's been a really disastrous year of development in Cloton. He's on his 3rd head coach there this year. Just a total mess. I wouldn't write him off for making the NHL next year. I think he'll be given every opportunity, but we might also have to be in a situation where we have a bit more patience, right? I think if I've learned anything from this management group with Slavkovsky, with Joshua Waugh, is that they are patient. They're ready to, they're willing to let players figure it out with veterans and with young players as well, giving them time to find their legs and find their niche. So he may be in the NHL next year. It depends on what they decide is the best route. But the fact that he's right-handed gives him a pretty huge advantage, especially if David Savard is traded, or if Kovacevic, I've seen his name out there as well. I'd be surprised if he was traded. But if one of those 2 guys go, there's only one right-handed defenseman. And I don't think the long-term plan is to keep playing Goalie on the right when he's had some great games and some struggling games on the right side. It's tougher, I'm sure, to be on your weak side. So probably a good chance.
I think it makes sense to have him a year in Laval to get used to the smaller rink. I don't know, Rick, what do you think as a former defenseman?
Yeah, I mean, there's a 19-year-old kid that's going to have to get a real, understanding of what it's like to play in the NHL. Like they've done before, he's going to be given the opportunity, and he's going to show what he's able to do and not do. And the process of developing him is going to be obviously very important, that they don't overburden him with too much too soon. And everyone's different. The personalities are different. They adjust differently with a certain amount of time. And one thing I think will be consistent is he'll be given every opportunity. He'll be making mistakes, and then management will have a look at, okay, what's the path we need to take to develop this kid sooner than later, and make sure he gets full confidence in how to play at the NHL level. And he's got supposedly all the tools to be a good player, and now it's a matter of time to show his stuff, and if not in Laval, learn the game here, and let him develop.
What do you think, Knuckles?
Yeah, listen, he comes here to training camp next year. I'm sure he'll get games in training camp, get to kind of gauge where he is, and then maybe some time down in Laval. They have so many defensemen in the system. There's no pressure on moving this kid along too fast. Now, yeah, we saw Slavkovsky come in at that age, but I think that's a different animal. And you got him up front. He's a forward, and I think there's a lot more pressure on a defenseman coming into this league for sure. A young guy like that being you can get abused in this league as a young guy. And if you do, it can hurt your confidence and set you back. So, I think, it would be good to send him down to Laval, get him to come along. Come on, they get so many guys. Like Logan Mailloux, he hasn't seen a game up here yet, right? This kid, he can play. He can play, this kid. And, that's another guy you want to keep your eye on, But I think Ryan Backer, he'll get a sniff and then, put him down there, see how he develops, keep an eye on him. I think that's what I would do, but I'm not the GM.
Well, with all the young defensemen, that's why I wouldn't be surprised if Kent Hughes trades at least one of them, if not more, as some kind of a package deal, maybe with one of the first-round picks he has this year to try and get some goal-scoring forwards. But it'll be interesting to see what happens before 3 p.m. on Friday, and probably even more interesting in the offseason. Anyway, that's it for this week's HIO show. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out YouTube channel. Go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to sign up for the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. And, of course, go to hockeyinsideout.com every day for all the latest Canadiens news. We'll see you back here next week when Jessica Rusnak is hopefully feeling better and is back in her chair. And we'll talk about what Kent Hughes did or didn't do at the trade deadline. We'll see you soon.